So I'd like to welcome everybody to the second in our series of quality online course showcases. My name is Sam Enneman, and I will be the moderator for today's session. Before we get started, just a few guidelines. So our presenter will be stopping every few minutes to take questions, but if you either don't have a microphone, your microphone's not working, or you would just like to keep up with your questions, feel free to type your questions and comments into chat. And so while I'm speaking about chat, maybe if everyone would just type in what department you're in and where you're joining us from today. And go ahead and type that into chat for us. So if you have any technical problems, please, if you're on campus, call the IT service desk number, 75500. If you're off campus, go ahead and use the full number, 704-687-5500. Just a reminder that we are recording the session and we'll be sending out a link to the playback later today or tomorrow. So it looks like most of us are here on campus, but Sharon is at home, the home office. That's the way to do it. Do you have a question, Sharon? If so, I see your hand is raised, so, oops, okay, no problem. The basis of the courses that we've been looking at in this series are the fact that they have all gone through a Quality Matters program review, and this is the second course of the first four here on campus that have been recognized as meeting the Quality Matters standards. So I guess I'm going to start by asking, give me a check mark if you're familiar with the Quality Matters program, or an X if you're not. Okay, well, it looks like we've got a little bit of a split there, so I'll just quickly go through what Quality Matters is. This is a very high-level, not very detailed overview of Quality Matters. So Quality Matters is a faculty-centered peer review process. So in other words, you have other faculty members who have had courses reviewed, who are the ones who actually review the courses that you submit for this certification. So the Quality Matters, remember that it certifies the quality of online course design. It's only the course design, course layout that it actually looks at. It does not look at how the teaching of the course. So it consists of you submit a course for review, and then that review is based on the Quality Matters rubric. So the rubric looks something like this. There are 8 general standards, and you can see the different areas that they cover: course overview, learning objectives, assessment, instructional materials, interaction, course activities, interaction, technology, learner support, and accessibility. So under those 8 general standards are 43 specific standards, and it's those specific standards that you actually achieve points on if you meet the standard. So Quality Matters does not demand perfection. If your course achieves 85% of the standards, then that course is recognized as having met standards. And that is just a quick overview of the Quality Matters rubric and kind of the course review program. So today I'd like to introduce our presenter, Dr. Susan Lynch from the School of Nursing. The course that she is going to be showing us is Information Technology Applications in Healthcare. Susan is a clinical assistant professor, and she's also the coordinator of the RN BSN program in the School of Nursing. So please welcome Susan Lynch.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop so you can kind of see the home page of the course. Let me make sure it gets to where I want it to be. And thank you all for attending. As Sam said, my name is Susan Lynch, and I'm the RN to BSN coordinator here in the School of Nursing. The RN to BSN program is a 100% online program. It's a completion program for associate degree nurses to come back and get their bachelor's degree. So I've been at UNC Charlotte for 9 years, and the whole program, which is 31 credit hours, is online. So Quality Matters is important to us in the School of Nursing to ensure that we have a consistent framework that our faculty can use and to guide course design. And I think that's one of the most important things of Quality Matters. It doesn't tell you how to teach, it does provide you standards in which how to build the course. And so the plan for today is to kind of go through the elements of the standards kind of one by one and show you some different things I have done. And I think, you know, the important thing when you're looking at these standards is really to think about your student group and how you can utilize the different standards and criteria that they suggest to best meet the needs of your students. That's really the main goal of Quality Matters, and I think it provides us a great, you know, opportunity. So when we're looking at Standard 1, and as you saw at the very beginning, Standard 1 is really course overview and the introduction. And it's really looking at kind of setting the stage for your course. And so when you look at the homepage, you really want to kind of provide, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit, provide information, and I think that in this first block. And in this first block, you really want to set things up so that they're organized for the students. Students typically get very overwhelmed with a bunch of content. So organizing them into subject areas will help the student really know where to get started. And that's what comes up on the first block of the course under course resources is a start here document. This really gives the student an opportunity to say, where in the world am I supposed to go with all of these icons and all of these documents that I see in front of me? So the start here document for this course is basically, this is a Word document that I really just go through basics of saying. As you see in the first bullet point, read the entire list and hints on this page. And as we go through the course, we look at the different elements. And so it really provides the best overview. Start at the top. It allows the student not to be so overwhelmed at looking at the course homepage, but to really see how the course is designed. I divide this into 3 sections, just general information. What should they do first? Looking at the course syllabus, looking at the due dates on the calendars. Then I go into specifics about assignments, and then giving them a resource for student resources. So really, it truly is just a place where they can get a quick glance of where in the world and how should I organize my time when I start to look at this course. It provides an opportunity to kind of chunk your information into certain sections so that the students can follow you a lot better. Also in the course overview, you really want to have an ability to introduce yourself to the students, and this can be done in a variety of ways. You can do a video, you can do just a written narrative, you can do, and what I've done is I've done a PowerPoint which I narrated, and it's very short and quick, and usually I give a little bit of details about me professionally, but then I try to provide a little bit of personal information. You really kind of want to set the tone and provide something personal that you want to share, obviously within your own personal philosophy of that, but it provides a kind of setting the stage of, we're in this together, and kind of sets the tone for community. And you also want to look at how the students are introducing themselves in the group, and how are you going to facilitate that. I usually have that done in the very first week of class. Usually I set the stage that in the first week of class, in Learning Module 1, it really is an introduction. I give the students some time to get oriented to this course because I think this is the most important part so that students don't feel too overwhelmed with what's going to be happening throughout the semester. Students in this course will introduce themselves. This is a course that's not only given to nurses, but also kinesiology students, the respiratory therapy students, and the sleep study students also take this course. So typically in this discussion, we have students who have made professional experience maybe from a couple of months to 20 years. So usually in introductions with these kind of students, I like them to tell us a little bit about their experience so that they can kind of build a sense of community to see who's in the same specialty as they are, how many years experience. And then I tend to collate that data and kind of give them a snapshot. You know, what is the range? What is the average years of experience? And then they can kind of get a sense of identity. And that's really typically how a lot of the introduction is done. When you're looking at just the setup from the beginning, I've been teaching online courses since the late 90s, and I found that organization and a consistent approach to the course is probably the most important. It's not about having every bell and whistle you can have on the planet. It's about using whatever strategies work for your group of students and doing that consistently. So every learning module and every week assignments are going to look very similar throughout the whole course so that the students know what to expect. And this is one I taught in spring, so the week of January 7th through the 18th, they know exactly what to expect. And it really looks no different as we scroll down from Learning Module 2, Learning Module 3, all the way through the course. So there's no surprises, and I think that really helps students really get a good flow through the course. Are there any questions relating to Standard 1 and the course overview? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move into the learning modules themselves, and I'm going to look at we're going to kind of look at Learning Module 3 specifically. What's important about the learning modules in general is Standard 2 is really about learning objectives, but I think the biggest part that anyone who wants to start on the Quality Matters journey, and even if you don't want to be certified, the best place to really get most of the standards kind of where most of them kind of fit is in the learning module design. The learning modules can look at multiple standards, and when we go through the standards, you'll see that how you design your learning modules really addresses standards 2, 3, 4, 5, and 8. I know you don't remember those, but standard 2 is the learning objectives and how you write that. Standard 3 is going to be your assessment and how you're going to evaluate the students' grade in the course. Standard 4 is the instructional materials, and Standard 5 are the course activities. And finally, Standard 8 is accessibility. So the design of the learning module is really important. So we're going to look at one learning module and show you how I have kind of set this up. When you're looking at your objectives, this is really an important piece for Quality Matters, is really making them student focused and what you want the student to achieve. Each module or each topic area throughout the course should have their own set of objectives. What do we plan to achieve in this portion of the course? The courses in the RN to BSN are typically designed on weekly modules. It provides us a structure so that students have flexibility within the week, but aren't just kind of out there saying, get all this done by the end of the class, because it's not self-paced. It is a very structured curriculum. So in addition to your learning module objectives for the week, you want to also relate how are those objectives kind of contributing to the course objectives as a whole. So as you look at the bottom of this first block under unit objectives, EBO in the School of Nursing is an evidence-based objectives our entire undergraduate curriculum is designed so we're looking at evidence-based objectives and values-based objectives. So here the objective for the course is to evaluate the quality of data or information obtained through information technology. That's pretty broad, so then we're going to look at very specific areas for this particular learning module. So here we're looking at, in the beginning, the unit objectives really address Standard 2. As we move down, when you're looking at what are the reading assignments, you're really looking at instructional materials. Are you going to have them do a reading? Are you going to have them view a PowerPoint? Are you going to have them go to a website? Do you have articles for them? Whatever your instructional materials are going to be, this is kind of the area where you're going to address Standard 4. And depending on the content and your selection as the faculty, that will vary. Learning activities or course activities, as Standard 5 is called, is really like, what are you having the student do? I think one of the major advantages of online learning is the student has to engage in the content. They really can't be a passive learner sitting in the classroom and listening to a faculty present material. This is where you've got to decide as a faculty what are the best mechanisms for your students to learn the content. So outlining this for the student and keeping the same structure in every module will allow the students to understand this is where I find what I have to do this week. So I have them in this module go to certain websites that I want them to review about information technology, about quality data, and about different healthcare organizations that look at quality healthcare. And how do you use those websites? So one of the questions I'm kind of prompting them through this is, why is it important that we validate websites that we use in our practice? And how might these websites and how might the information you find here impact the practice? So those are some examples of how the learning activities can really help guide the student and meet some of those standards. And so this basically goes through a little bit about one strategy that they can use to evaluate websites. So I give them a couple of examples of ways that they can ask themselves questions when they go to certain websites to see if they're valid or not. At the end is, that's what I want them to do, that's what I want them to engage, but how do we engage them and talk to our students in the learning activities and in our learning module? At the end of the learning module, a lot of the kind of the crux, and we'll talk about this regarding learner engagement, is how are you facilitating engagement in the course. Each module for us really looks at the faculty designing activities and discussions that the students would engage in, and we'll touch on that a little bit more. So the next standard is really looking at assessment and looking at measurement. How do the students know what they're going to be graded on? I'm going to go back up to the top here. Obviously in your syllabus, you're going to have an outline of how the grading occurs in the course. Well, the one thing that QM really recognizes is putting things in multiple places. Sometimes you think, as faculty, that's very repetitive, and why do I need to do that? But students are going in multiple directions. The more times you say something in a different way, especially online, the more likely they're going to get it. So when we look at assignments, the assignments are going to be described in the syllabus, but then I also have another section just on the major course assignments in the course. You want your rubrics and you want your assignment grading in the multiple places. So I would have them in the syllabus, I want to have them in this area of course assignments, and I'm also going to have them in the Dropbox. So when they go to enter their assignment, it's going to come up so that they know what they're being graded on. I'm going to show you one form grading. A lot of times class participation in online courses, I tend to give a lot of credit for this, typically 25% of the course grade or 20% of the course grade based on the other requirements. But students always want to know, what do I have to do to get the points? And this faculty have very different approaches, but giving the student a rubric for how they're going to be graded on the class participation is important. I'm trying to open that link. That will provide them an idea of how they're going to be graded. So here on this this page, to discuss some form grading for class participation, I outline how they're going to get their 25 points. And then how they're going to get full credit, partial credit, or no credit. I tend to, this is my personal philosophy, is I tend to grade things, either they did it well, they did it kind of halfway, or they didn't do it. And this kind of provides kind of some outcomes of what I expect. Discussions are to be thorough, thoughtful, and concise. Student engage in the conversation. They respond to the peers. I want them to elevate the discussion. I want them to ask questions of their peers. I want them to provide examples from their practice to help illustrate the points. We as a faculty in online courses are really a facilitator, and that's what we're trying to engage. And so throughout the course, they'll know what their participation is. When we're still looking at Standard 3 assessment and measurement, it's also important to think about how you're assessing the students. Are you having low stakes and high stakes assignments? Do the students have an opportunity to ask questions about the assignments? For me, and in this course, the low stakes assignments would be these participation points, as each module is basically 2 points, and so then they're going to earn points as they go through the course, and they're going to be able to see that they're earning, and they'll be able to track their progression through the course and be able to kind of see how they're performing. Are there any questions at this point related to Standard 2 learning objectives or Standard 3 assessment? Okay. One other thing okay, hold on. I think we've got a question. What is a track my process? I'm going to get to that because that's going to be one of the last things I look at. I'm going to be able to talk about that at the end.
There was a previous question from Jim.
Okay.
Please define low stakes versus high stakes.
Sure. When I'm looking at low stakes, I'm looking at assignments that are kind of lower in value and how they contribute to the course grade. Like, to me, the low stakes assignments of each week they can earn 2 points. That's pretty low stakes compared to their education project, for in this particular course, where it's 25% of their total grade. So looking at things that are a little on the lower scale that doesn't overwhelm them with meeting the criteria versus something that contributes a huge chunk to their grade. And when we're looking at kind of the high-stakes assignments, sometimes online, and I think what's important is, and what QM really recognizes, is student resources and providing them enough information so they can meet the objectives of the course. Okay. How many total points in the course? I have 100 total points in the course. I tend to do my course on points. So this is just my personal philosophy, and that students can see how they earn points as they go through. So they start the course with a 0, and then they earn points as they go through the course. I found over many years that students don't tend to argue as much about, you took points off and you're giving me an A, they're earning the points. So it kind of sets a standard that I actually like with my students. So 100 total points, and then you can get into percentages or points, whichever you feel better. And in all honesty, I think with most learning management systems like Moodle, point totals are easier to manage your gradebook in all actuality than trying to do a percentage. So when you're looking at high-stakes assignments and you're looking at kind of the major components, you find, when you have directions and they're written in the syllabus, there's always questions. And the good thing about having a face-to-face class is the students can have a dialogue with you and tell you what the problems are that they don't understand. It's a little harder online. So a lot of times I'll use a general question area as a way to try to generate some dialogue about assignments, and is there any questions about the assignment? This assignment's coming up. Does the group having any issues related to the assignment? But then over time, I've taught this class now for almost 8 years, and it's evolved. But I have found the same mistakes sometimes in assignments, and you try to clarify the written the written instructions, but it just doesn't seem to work sometimes. So there's different ways you can, navigate and try to think of how you can help a student understand. For example, the education project is an assignment that really students have struggled with in the past because they don't get all the elements throughout the written assignment. I'm not sure if they just get a piece of it. They're asked to create an education using technology as their medium. They stay so focused on the education piece of it, they forget the other parts of the assignment. So I have an example that I provide of a student who submitted a great project a couple years ago that gave me permission to use it. And then I created, used screencasting as a way through our education project tips. And I'm not going to show the video, but what it does is it allows you to use your screenshots here and be able to create a video that has the different elements of the project. So I actually can take the student on a journey through the example, through the syllabus, where are the requirements. I'm able to tell them what are the pitfalls most students have. Because we want our students to be successful. And so this was just another method that can allow the student to understand the concept so they can get it visually, they can have an auditory piece, and they have the written directions. And so I kind of walked them through that. Learner interaction in Standard 6 is really an important piece in deciding how you as faculty are going to manage student questions, how you're going to interact with the students, what do you expect from faculty to student interaction, and what do you expect from student to student interaction. Typically with the faculty to student, you've got to decide for yourself and your students, what are your time frames? When can students expect to have questions answered? When can students expect that assignments will be graded? How are you going to be involved in the discussion? Those are all questions you have to decide as a faculty member. For example, as you'll see at this homepage, office hours. I specifically say that they're individually scheduled to meet the student needs. I've tried multiple ways to try to do office hours online, and for my particular group of students who are typically nurses who work either 12-hour shifts, they work either days, they work either nights, they work either evenings, they work either, during the week, there's really no good standard time. So I found that, okay, I want to set up individual appointments. But I found that just putting the wording as determined or by appointment only really puts off the student, and it really kind of sends a negative message. So I really want to say, I want to meet your needs, but this is really the best way. I've done virtual office hours, and nobody shows up because it doesn't meet their needs. And so, yes, you can have them and you can sit at your desk and have virtual office hours, but it's really not going to meet the needs of the student. So I kind of find that for my students, it's better for me to be open and keep open dialogue. I try to respond to emails very quickly, typically within 24 hours. Sometimes over the weekend, I'll say it'll take 48. And try to grade assignments within a certain time frame. It doesn't matter what your time frames are, just as long as the student knows them and knows what the expectation is as you as a faculty member communicating with the student. For us in our learning activities in this course, we do a lot of kind of case study approach to how we're going to discuss the content, and using our students as being really the experts. They have lots of experience in the healthcare field. So I, as a faculty, my role is to facilitate that and pull that out of the student. And I value that, and I want the students to know they're valued. So my participation in the discussion board is really to try to elevate the discussion to a new level, or to clarify concepts that are discussed within the discussion that are unclear. So typically, I participate in the discussion at least on a weekly basis, and at least look at it a couple of days early in to see kind of where students are engaged, and then ask some clarifying questions of the students. I kind of role model that for the student, because that's what I want them to do for each other. What are other considerations in this particular topic? What are things that might be barriers to achieving something you're trying to achieve in whatever a topic area you're considering? Student-to-student interaction is probably the one thing they want the most definition of. How many posts do I have to post each week to get the points? That tends to be their priority. I tend not to like to define it. I find that if I say, and I know my rubric says 1 to 2 to get partial credit, 1 response, to me that's kind of minimum. I don't like to quantify it with a number. I personally feel that students tend to, if they have a number, they'll only go to that number. They won't rise above it. So I look for engagement and try to define that. When I grade their modules on a weekly basis, I try to give them feedback related to that. You asked your peer a really good question, and your response to them, that's a great way to elevate the discussion. Or I'll tell them, you really only gave us a basic answer. You need to consider engaging in the conversation more, consider alternate points of view. And so as they're moving through the course, I'm giving feedback on their discussions on an individual basis, need a student, so that they don't fixate so much on how many do I have to do. I find if they fixate on that number, they'll give you very rote, I agree statements. Oh, that was such a great post. I totally agree. And that's really worthless, and what it does is it really just clutters up the discussion board with information that's not important. And so I usually try to minimize that a little bit. So that's looking at, Standard 6. So we had previously talked about Standard 4, instruction materials, and the Standard 5 with course activities. Are there any questions related to Standards 4, 5, or 6? How do I give individual feedback in a discussion forum in Moodle? Typically, I go into the grade book, and there's an area in the grade book, because each of my weekly modules are set up as a grade item. And there is a dialog box where you can give feedback, and I give them feedback on every module. What I find is in the beginning of the course, I give them very specific feedback, and as we move through the course, they don't need it anymore. I tend to use that as a way to help the student elevate their discussion a bit and elevate the kind of the criteria of the course. So they each will get individual feedback on a weekly basis. I tend to clump those, and I tell the students this, I tend not to grade them on a weekly basis. I tend to grade them every 2 weeks so that I can look at how are they evolving over time, and looking at 2 weeks at a time, not just individuals. I also kind of look back to see, are they improving? Are they trying to take in some of the comments I've taken? And I'll actually call them on it. If they've just done this kind of rote, post, 1 or 2 lines that really is not contributing to the overall discussion, I'll kind of call them on it and say, hey, the last 2 weeks you really have been pretty limited. You really need to step it up, or you're going to start getting docked points, and when you're not going to earn any points the next one. So you can kind of call them on that individual feedback, and they seem to appreciate that. Any other questions related to the instructional materials, the course activities, or the learner interaction? Okay. Yes, and we're going to talk about the Track My Progress in just a minute. When we're looking at learner support, one of the big areas is, and we're going to pull this up in the Start Here document again, and looking at resources. QM really wants to make sure students have a variety of resources to meet their needs related to the technology aspect and related to anything that the university has. So under student resources, the Distance Education Office, which my program is under, since it is a distance education program, has lots of services for the student. So for my students, that's what I want to highlight. I don't need to recreate, but giving students links to things so that they don't have to go to UNCC webpage and try to find it is really helpful. It allows you're kind of helping them navigate the university system. The Distance Education Office has a great student resources called, and it's down here at the bottom, called the Student Services Backpack. And it really pretty much utilizes all the resources from the library, even though I have a kind of pull out the nursing librarian and I give her name and her contact information. It really allows you to go through and see all the resources the university has for distance education students. Because that's one of our accreditation standards for the university, is distance education students need access to the same or similar resources as anyone on campus. So the Distance Education Office has that already. So there's no reason for me to recreate it. I'll send them there. Also looking at Moodle and connections, there's a YouTube video that gives them a very brief overview. The library and their resources, the nursing librarian can be very helpful if they have questions related to different types of searches related into healthcare databases. And so this learner support is really important. It's in multiple places. I'm going to have it here in the Start Here document. You're going to have your university policies and access to information in your syllabus. So there's lots of different places that you're going to have it. There's also on the home page of the course also a little click here, technical and accessibility help. So it basically, that link will provide the 1-800 number and the university helpline for students if they have technical problems. Accessibility is standard 8 and is one of it's not only about accessibility for people who are, hearing impaired or visually impaired, it's also about accessibility to just components of the course. And do you have, if you're going to a different site, is there accessibility on that web page? And what are those kind of requirements? I would say that probably standard 8 was the one I think probably faculty have the most unfamiliar information about, and I think it's one of probably the hardest parts when you're trying to get QM certified for faculty who, even if they're experienced really online teaching, this is kind of the one area that may be a little bit more stressful for them a little bit, to try to get things accessible. It's important that if you're going to use videos like YouTube or use any other videos, they have to be captioned. For anyone who has any kind of visual impairments or hearing impairments, the captions, well actually for hearing, the captions are really helpful. And also that helps if there's any kind of audio issue or if they have problems, technology-wise too. One of the things which I think is a new tool I saw was we use a lot of Word documents, and the reason as we were reviewing QM, this is probably one of the feedback I got that the QM reviewers really didn't like. However, I'm going to continue it because it serves the students and actually the faculty well, is in the Word documents. You can check the accessibility. If you pull up your Word document, and here's a screenshot of that. If you go under Check for Issues, there is a box that says Check Accessibility. So you can go in and check every Word document to ensure that you don't have too many spaces, so that if a screen reader is trying to read the document, that you've got all of those issues covered. It tends to be a lot of blank spaces. It tends to be like if you have pictures, they need to have captions underneath the pictures. So when you look at my learning module, in the Word, I had to go through and tag each of those pictures to describe what they were. So if a student was using a screen reader, that it would be able to say, this is a picture of a man looking at a book. That's one of the pictures in my learning modules. So that's this is a great little tool that can be used in Word that I think is very helpful. Any questions related to Standard 8 accessibility? Culture. The video editing tool. I do not. I use, in all honesty, very limited technology and different other types of medium in the course, and there's a couple of reasons why. I try to go pretty low tech. This is my experience and just how I have found that nursing students are typically not very savvy when it comes to technology, and so when I've tried to use new elements or different elements, they seem to create more controversy and drama for the students, and then it's worse. So I have tried to keep things using the same types of technology within the course. If I use a YouTube video, that's really about it. Or using a different type of, websites, typically just general internet connection students don't have problems with, but I've used different tools that just have, in all honesty, failed and just create more stress. So I have not used that myself in this course. I think one of an important aspect of looking and kind of moving into the quality matters and the experience of this project is, when the project began, there were resources from the Center of Teaching Learning and from our particular college's instructional technologists that really provided faculty support in the training of QM, and it also provided us a peer review process. I think it really helps faculty to be validated that the courses they're teaching really are the best available and are created based on some best practice. It's the same reason why you go to an education conference. You want to learn a little bit, but you also want to make sure you're doing what everybody else is doing. And when you're using a national standard like Quality Matters, you can kind of know that you're following best practice. Collaboration with other faculty. We had a group with education and in the college and with nursing, and that really helped because we were able to dialogue a little bit and get some different strategies of how we teach. QM pretty much is a structure approach that really is based on best practice.
Can we go back? There are
Sure.
a few questions left over in the chat. So, one was you were going to talk about track my progress.
Yes, I haven't gotten there yet. I want to get there.
Okay, so Sharon asked the question, do you use Kaltura? And Sharon, by that, do you mean did she use the video resource? Is that what you're asking?
To share information. I've never used Kaltura.
Okay, well, I'll just clarify. So Kaltura is really the name of the third party that we use for the streaming video service that's integrated in Moodle, and that's when you use a video resource or when you use a video assignment. So you're actually...
Exactly. In this course, we don't use, the students could choose to use the video resource if they wanted to use that for their education project for this particular course. They haven't used it in the past. They typically create websites or web pages for their projects or use Facebook or something. We do use it in the RN to BSN curriculum. We do use the video tool for our health assessment course when students have to demonstrate physical assessment skills. So it's used within the curriculum, not within this particular course.
Okay, so Mary Alice asked, do you use instructors' news and announcements or quick mail to broadcast? How frequently and primarily what do you use it for?
Typically, I use the announcements, and I call mine announcements just because I rename that news tool because I want it to be labeled as announcements because that's how I think about it. Anything, I don't use it on necessarily a regular basis, but I will use it if there's anything that I want the entire students to get that information. Not only would they have it in their announcements, they'll also have it in their email. And so if I find that there was a question about an assignment and the directions didn't seem clear, I might put an announcement out to say, a question was asked about the assignment. I want to make sure everybody has the same information and clarify this assignment for the entire group. I really encourage students to use the general question area as a way to ask questions so everybody gets that information, but typically some students don't want to use that and they email you individually. So I tend to either use that announcement page as a way to make sure that students get the information. I also kind of tell them at the beginning that if they're getting an email from me or any faculty that they're taking an RN to BSN curriculum, they need to read it. And that's a way they can manage their email is to look for who the sender is.
Okay, Jim asked the question, do you have lectures? How do you handle playback?
I do not typically have lectures. And it's really the student groups I have, and that's the reason why I don't use them in this class. This particular course is healthcare professionals who have been in practice for years. Most of them have an average of 5 years or more in clinical practice. I don't really need to deliver a lecture about necessarily particular content. When I do that, if there's a problem with understanding a certain concept, sometimes I will do a very brief narrated PowerPoint to highlight some information in the course and do a voiceover for that PowerPoint. When I do it, I tend to use very short bursts of information. I try to use 5 to 10 minutes blocks of information in those videos or in those PowerPoints and not make them very long. Typically, I've had students who've had issues when I've used them in the past. They can't upload the file because it's too big of a video file or it's too big of a PowerPoint. The shorter bursts tend to reach people a lot easier without any kind of technical difficulty. And that's my personal choice and philosophy. I think it really depends on the content and who you're teaching, who your student group is, whether that's a teaching methodology you want to use. When we were doing, kind of to answer the question about track my progress, when we were doing the QM reviewer feedback, one of the feedbacks the reviewer gave me was, how do students track their progress? How do they know how they're doing and if they've done, what they need to? So I looked at that and said, okay, I'm thinking the grade book tells them how they're going because they're getting graded as they move through the course. They wanted a different methodology. So what I created for the students is Track My Progress. It is basically a tool in Moodle that's called Checklist, and I actually put Track My Progress because I wanted to use the words that QM reviewer used. And then when you go into this, it's a way that it basically provides a checklist of all the required elements in every learning module. You can set this up multiple ways. You can give the student access so that they can change the list if they want to, or you can do it where it's just you. I let students change the list. I used this for the first time this semester, and I probably had 3 or 4 comments from students in their last semester. Oh, I wish we would have this throughout the whole course. I can't believe this is so good for me. I like my lists. I like to check them off. So for a list person, this can be very helpful. It may not be helpful for all students, but it was a way that I could address the comment from the QM reviewer, which I thought was very valid, and provide a mechanism using a tool in Moodle that is there for us to use. So that's kind of how I used that feedback. When you're looking at the QM reviewers and when they review your course, we as faculty had dialogue with them in kind of an introduction, and then we had a meeting where they could clarify questions after they had reviewed the course. There tends to be 3 reviewers, and they each rank every standard and every criteria of your course and give you a rating. And they don't really, they do it individually. They don't obtain consensus per se. They basically give you points. And there are some items that you have to have 100% agreement, and each person has to say you've met that criteria. And that's a good place to start. If you have to meet the criteria, those are the ones you need to look at first. And then the nice to meet criteria kind of fall under that. I think if you're really looking at starting on a QM, looking at the course overview and the Learning Objective Section Standards 1 and Standards 2 are probably the best place to get started. And when you're trying to kind of develop your course and put in some QM standards. You don't have to be certified necessarily, but using this rubric as a way to kind of guide your design, I think, can be helpful. Are there any other questions as we're winding up our time? The sound kind of went out, so I didn't know if we were still with you.
We're still here. So
okay.
I don't know if there are any other questions. If there are, well, now is the time to ask. It looks like there aren't. So thank you, Susan, for an excellent presentation.
Well, thank you, guys.
So if anybody has any questions about how to design your course for QM, for Quality Matters, talk to Susan Lynch. So before we wrap up, I'd just like to, this event has already passed. Too bad. I don't know if you were there with us last Friday, but we had an excellent session with Todd Zakrysic from Chapel Hill. And just to point out, we do have some upcoming, a few more webinars coming up. Next week we have the 3rd in our series of how to create and lead great web conferencing, and that is presentation materials that pop, and that will be led by Bobby Hobgood from Language and Culture Studies. And then on the 19th, we have our monthly How Do I webinar, lunchtime webinar, and Harini Ramaprasad from CCI will be speaking about activity completion in Moodle and how she uses that to track students' progress, and also how students use that to track their own progress. So those, if you're interested in those, please sign up for them on our online calendar. So just one last thing before we wrap up. Since we've gone through your lunch, I'm offering you some virtual desserts. So please let us know which one is your favorite. These are all from a dessert cafe that I came across in Vancouver many years ago called Death by Chocolate, of course. So let us know your favorite desserts. So again, thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in another one of our webinars or any of our workshops. So thanks again.
Thank you.